Despite the decolonization of Africa, several of its territories are still under the control of other countries, especially the former European colonizers. This video brings you the most disputed territories with other countries outside the continent of Africa. The video has omitted some of African territories which have not been formally claimed by African nations, including the Northwest African islands of the Canary, which are under the control of Spain, though Morocco has never presented concrete claims, but a low-scale conflict over the maritime border between her and the Canary Islands suffice. First on our list, we have the cities of Melilla and Ceuta. On the northern coast of Morocco's Mediterranean coast lies some of the Spanish territories in Africa, which forms the only European Union's land borders with the continent. The cities trace their history with Spain to the 15th century, and they have long been a critical point in diplomatic relations between the two countries, with Spain asserting that both territories are its integral parts and have the same status as the semi-autonomous regions on its mainland. The government of Morocco has repeatedly contested Spain's sovereignty over the territories, and after independence from Spain and France, Morocco acted in good faith, assuming the issue would be resolved amicably in the future by agreeing to separate the issue of Ceuta and Melilla from the other territorial disagreements, but the Spaniards didn't respond in kind. Currently, Spain has always rejected any negotiation on the two cities and insists that they have been Spanish for more than 5 centuries and that they are an integral part of the Spanish state. Morocco, however, argues that Spain's territories within its kingdom are a remnant of colonialism and should be given back. The most significant barrier to Morocco taking over the two territories, though, is the fact that the populations of Ceuta and Melilla wish to remain Spanish. Next, we have the Chagos Islands. Located deep in the Indian Ocean, the Chagos archipelago is a territory administered by the British under the Indian Ocean British Territory. The British ruled the archipelago together with other islands in the western Indian Ocean that form the modern-day nations of Seychelles and Mauritius. The issue of Chagos involved the British colonial past, American strategic interests, and Mauritian claims of sovereignty. Before the British came, Chagos had a permanent population which had lived there for centuries. The Chagosians harvested coconuts and they fished. After the British government came, they forcibly evicted its inhabitants, who later formed small communities in Mauritius and the Seychelles, with little support from any of those countries. As a remembrance, many kept sand from Chagos in small bowls in their home. During negotiations on granting Mauritian independence, the UK separated the Chagos archipelago from the colony of Mauritius. Only Mauritius became independent, with the UK retaining the Chagos under British control. In 2000, the British High Court found that the removal of the Chagosians had been illegal, and the court granted them the immediate right to return to any of the islands except Diego Garcia. In 2019, Mauritius called the UK an illegal colonial occupier after it had ignored a United Nations mandated deadline to return the Chagos Islands to her. The United Nations had given UK 6 months to process the transfer, a move the UK and the US bitterly resisted. Even with all this, the territorial dispute between the two countries could be nearing an end. In November 2022, the UK's Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, James Cleverly, said that the UK and Mauritius had begun negotiations on a future handover of the Chagos Islands. Next on our list is Socotra. In the northwest Indian Ocean, between the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa, are 4 islands and 2 rocky islets, which appear as an extension of the African plate. This UNESCO World Heritage Site is globally important for biodiversity conservation because of its exceptionally rich and distinct flora and fauna, with over 37% of its species found nowhere else on Earth. The island is a part of the Republic of Yemen and under the de facto control of the United Arab Emirates and has been at the center of territorial dispute between Somalia and Yemen for many years. Over the centuries, Socotra has fallen under the control of many countries, including Ethiopia, Greece, Portugal, the British, and now it is under the control of Yemen. In the 8th century, Socotra was part of Ethiopia, and at that time, most of the people were Christian. The inhabitants were then converted to Muslim by prominent Arab Sufi scholars in the 13th century. It was since ruled by the Mahra sultans of southeastern Yemen, but were interrupted by the Portuguese in 1507 c. who came with an aim of setting a base to connect Socotra with India for trade purposes and to liberate the Christians from Islamic rule. In 1834 the British tried and failed to purchase the island, and in the 1880s, however, the Sultan accepted British protection for the entire Sultanate. The Sultanate came to an end in 1967 when Socotra became part of independent South Yemen and later, unified Yemen. In 2010, Somalia claimed that the Socotra archipelago was part of it, saying that it was located within its territory and borders, and requested the United Nations to determine the status of the archipelago, which led to Yemen submitting a request to the UN, saying the archipelago was its territory and history and its influence on it proved its claim. Situated in the Mozambique Channel of the Western Indian Ocean, lies Mayotte, an overseas department of France, comprising the two southeasternmost islands of the Comoros archipelago. The sovereignty of the youngest and smallest French department located in the Indian Ocean has been at the heart of a territorial dispute and a subject of heated debates for several decades. Initially, the islands were populated by Bantu farmers and fishermen from mainland Africa, as well as Malagasy traders and Austronesians from the Indonesian archipelago. In 1841, the Sultan of Mayotte, Andrian Tsaouli, ceded Mayotte to France, and the island became a French colony in 1843. In 1975, when the three northernmost islands of the Comoros declared independence, the inhabitants of Mayotte chose to remain with France, and in 1976, the French government introduced a special status for the island. The United Nations' constant policy regarding decolonization has been that independence must be effected in the framework of the colonial borders, and for that reason, it has not recognized the validity of that referendum. And during the late 20th century, over 20 UN resolutions have condemned France's annexation of Mayotte, while the independent Comoros, with the support of the African Union, have never ceased to claim the island.